Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I seriously can't believe how insane and messed up this whole experience turned out to be. It started out so simple. I just wanted to get my wife a cool birthday present since she's a huge Harry Potter nerd. Her birthday was coming up, and I know she doesn't often splurge on stuff for herself, so I wanted to surprise her with something special. I did a bunch of searching online to find the perfect Harry Potter gift. Finally, I came across this super detailed, high-end replica of Hogwarts Castle. It looked absolutely amazing in the photos on the website, with little carved figurines of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and all the major characters. It had intricately detailed stone walls and towers, and tiny windows that let you peek inside to see all the different rooms and halls lit up inside. There were little references everywhere to stuff from the books and movies. This thing was no simple toy. It was a true work of art for a Potterhead like my wife. The listing said it was handcrafted from over 2,000 individual pieces and made from premium materials. It wasn't cheap, $450 with shipping, but I figured for something so special, the money would be worth it to see the pure joy on my wife's face. I clicked purchase and eagerly awaited its arrival. A few days later, this gigantic fancy box showed up at our doorstep. I could barely carry the thing, it was so big and heavy. I hid it away in the closet until her birthday. The morning of, I told her I had a super surprise planned for later. She was giddy all day, constantly asking for hints about what it could be. Finally, after dinner, I dramatically brought the box out and told her to open it up. She was literally shaking with excitement as she carefully cut open the tape and folded back the styrofoam pieces. I was grinning ear to ear, waiting for her reaction. But as she lifted away the packing material, her whole face just fell. Where the Hogwarts castle should have been was a dead squirrel. Its little body was grotesquely contorted, limbs stiffly twisted at unnatural angles. Strange arcane symbols and words were crudely carved into its belly. I felt nauseous just looking at it. My excited smile melted into shock and disbelief. My wife actually screamed and recoiled in horror, backed up against the wall to get away from it. What kind of sick freak would send something like this instead of the gift I'd ordered? It was beyond messed up. My shock quickly turned to anger. I wanted answers and justice, but when I went online to the salvage page, it had been deleted. The company they listed as the manufacturer didn't seem to exist either. I tried tracking down the return address from the shipping label, but it was just an abandoned building downtown. Whoever did this covered their tracks well. I was dealing with some serious black magic type stuff here. I didn't want to just toss the mutilated squirrel carcass in our trash, where some little kid or unsuspecting neighbor might find it. So I grabbed a shovel and dug a deep hole, way out in the back corner of our property, as far from the house as I could. I dumped the thing in the hole and buried it real good, packed the dirt down tight, said a little prayer over it too, for good measure. I hoped that would contain whatever evil mojo was attached to that thing. Well, I thought the worst was over, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Over the next few weeks, strange phenomena started occurring around our house. We'd hear odd noises in the night, scraping, tapping sounds with no source. Items would be mysteriously misplaced or moved when we were out. Lights would flicker on and off, appliances turning on by themselves. It felt like there was some creepy, unseen presence stalking us. My wife was really shaken. She's always been kind of superstitious about paranormal stuff, so this just confirmed all of her fears. I did my best to reassure her, but honestly, I was unnerved too. Things escalated when we started catching glimpses of this shadowy lurking figure outside at night. It resembled a person in shape and form, but the way it moved wasn't natural. It seemed to appear and disappear into the darkness. We installed motion sensor floodlights and cameras, but it always managed to evade them, lurking just out of frame. By this point, it was obvious we were dealing with some real dark occult forces. This was no kid's prank or faulty wiring. In desperation, I found this shaman guy advertising banishing evil spirits on Craigslist and invited him over. Yeah, I know, sounds crazy, but we were freaked out. He arrived that night with bundles of sage, candles, and these strange pouches. He went through every room chanting in a foreign language, burning the herbs, and doing these mystical hand gestures. I'll admit I was skeptical at first, but immediately after he finished, we both felt this tangible change in the energy of the house. For the first time in over a week, I slept peacefully through the night with no disturbances. Despite the ritual's success, we're still pretty shaken up and looking to move to a new place ASAP just for peace of mind. I should have known better than to buy something sketchy off Craigslist, even if it seemed like an amazing deal at the time. We're just grateful we got rid of whatever sinister forces were attached to that squirrel before any lasting harm was done. Still gives me chills though when I imagine some freak carving up small animals and mailing them to strangers. The whole thing is just so twisted and messed up. But the important thing is my wife and I came through this ordeal together. No dark magic can tear apart our bond. Selling that old beat-up sofa on Craigslist was a huge mistake. I was just trying to get rid of it and make a little cash, but I ended up inviting a total creepster into my home. Lesson learned, don't trust strangers from the internet. It started innocently enough. We bought a new couch, so I figured I'd sell our old floral print sofa on Craigslist for a couple $100. It was pretty worn out with stains, rips, and sagging cushions, but I thought maybe a college kid or someone furnishing a basement rec room might want it. I posted the ad with a couple of photos and included all the details. Brown and yellow floral pattern, minimal wear and tear. Great for a starter sofa. I said I was asking $200, but also wrote, make me an offer, at the end, hoping to drum up more interest. The first few responses seemed normal. People asked if it was still available and wanted to know the dimensions. I answered them politely, saying thanks for reaching out, but that I was waiting to see more offers before selling it. But then I got a message from a guy named Tim saying he was interested in taking a look. He was apologetic and said he desperately needed a sofa after a recent breakup, but was short on cash after getting a crummy apartment. I felt bad for him, so I agreed to let him come see it that evening after I got home from work. Big mistake. Right at 7 p.m., there was a loud knock at the door. I opened it to find a disheveled, unshaven man I assumed was Tim. Without even a hello, he barged right in past me and began scrutinizing my living room. Wow, nice place you got here, he said with a whistle. I awkwardly replied thanks as he made himself comfortable on the couch, sinking into the worn cushions. As he glanced around the room, he called out, "Got any other furniture you're looking to sell?" I told him no, just the shabby chic sofa currently underneath him. But he didn't stop there with the intrusive questions. He asked how much my rent was, if I lived alone or had roommates, and how long I had been in the apartment. His nosy prodding seriously gave me the creeps, but I politely answered that I'd lived there alone for 2 years. Seemingly unsatisfied with seeing just the living room, Tim suddenly got up and invited himself to check out the rest of this nice place. He wandered toward the kitchen as I scrambled after him. This guy clearly had no boundaries. I felt incredibly uneasy as he opened cabinets and peered into the rooms down the hallway. But the last straw was when he pushed open the door to my bedroom and had the audacity to look inside. Who did he think he was barging into my private space like that? At that point, I firmly told Tim he had to leave immediately. But on his way out, he lingered in the hall and pointed to some family photos, asking who the kids were. So, disturbing. I tersely replied that it was none of his business and ushered him out the door. On the front step, he turned around and lecherously proposed that he could make it worth my while if I worked something out regarding the sofa. I felt exposed knowing this predator now knew where I lived and had been inside my home. I couldn't slam the door fast enough. After that traumatic experience, I promptly deleted the Craigslist ad. That sofa wasn't worth the invasion of privacy and sense of security in my own home. I kept peering out the windows, half expecting to see Tim lurking around outside. Over the next few days, I became consumed with worrying that he or some other weirdo could show up at any time. I barely slept, instead staying up to triple check all the locks and doors. I even ordered a video doorbell security system so I'd know if Tim came back. The whole ordeal made me feel violated. I should have listened to my initial gut instinct that letting a random stranger come inside seemed like a bad idea. But I ignored the red flags because I felt sorry for him. Clearly that was naive on my part. From now on, I will only meet people selling stuff in public places like coffee shops. And I'm sticking to estate sales to find furniture, Way better than dealing with Craigslist creepsters. I'm just glad I was home alone when Tim showed up. If my kids had been there to witness a stranger rifling through our home, I don't know what I would have done. This was definitely a wake-up call about protecting my family's safety and privacy. Selling online may seem like an easy way to make a quick buck, but you have to be really careful about who you interact with. Let my unsettling experience be a cautionary tale so other people stay safe. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Your peace of mind is worth far more than any old furniture. Selling my car on Craigslist was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. I should have known right from the start that the guy who showed up with a wad of cash was bad news. But I was moving out of state soon and desperate to get rid of my old 2010 Toyota, so I ignored all the red flags. This shifty character calling himself Mike contacted me about the listing. He asked very few questions and insisted on meeting that same day in the parking lot of a coffee shop to check out the car. When he arrived, he barely glanced under the hood or kicked the tires. After a 2-minute inspection, he peeled off 8 $100 bills from a huge roll of cash in his pocket. I was so blown away by all that money, I didn't think to ask where it came from. We signed the bill of sale he handed me a Michigan driver's license as ID, and off he drove in my old car. The whole exchange took less than 10 minutes. A few weeks later, I got a call from a detective at the county sheriff's department back home. He asked if I had recently sold a dark blue 2010 Toyota Camry. I confirmed that was my car, and he informed me it had been involved in an armed robbery at a gas station just days after I sold it. The entire time I spoke with him, my mind was racing. How could my old beat-up sedan have been used as a getaway car for a holdup? The detective questioned me thoroughly about the sale, but all I could tell him was the buyer's first name. When he pressed me for details, I admitted we met in a shady parking lot deal, and I let the guy test drive it alone. None of that looked good for me. After a real grilling by the detective, I got a visit from a couple sheriff's deputies who had even more questions. They showed me some security footage from the gas station robbery, and sure enough, it was my old car. By this point, I was freaking out. I described Mike as best I could, but the cops were frustrated I didn't have his last name or phone number. I finally remembered the fake Michigan license he'd given me, which made the deputies even more suspicious. In their eyes, I was either an accomplice covering for this crook or the world's most gullible idiot. Either way, they were adamant that I needed to come down to the station and work with a sketch artist. At the station, I worked with this artist for over an hour describing every detail of Mike's forgettable face. The whole time, the detectives stared at me, studying my reactions. I knew they still suspected I was in on this robbery. After what felt like an interrogation, they finally let me go with a warning not to leave town anytime soon. I hoped that was the end of it, but this thing wasn't over yet. A few months later, I got a subpoena in the mail to appear before a grand jury. The DA's office was charging Mike with armed robbery and wanted me to testify about the car sale. So I had to miss work, buy a last-minute plane ticket back home, and tell this whole twisted tale all over again to a jury. The prosecutor grilled me about that sketchy parking lot deal. I could tell from the jury's faces they wondered if I was telling the full truth. After my testimony, the DA took me aside and point-blank asked if I had conspired with Mike on this crime. I vehemently denied it, but I don't think he fully believed me. In the end, the jury didn't indict me as an accomplice, but the DA warned that I could still face charges for facilitating this robbery through an illegal sale. I had to hire a lawyer to fight those allegations and make sure I didn't end up serving jail time just for selling my old car. After months of legal wrangling and sleepless nights, the charges against me were finally dropped. When it was all over, the DA even apologized for putting me through the ringer. He claimed they had to fully investigate me, even though I was probably just a patsy in Mike's scheme. I learned a hard lesson from this experience. No more person-to-person sales through Craigslist. From now on, I'm only selling cars through licensed dealers, even if it means less money in my pocket. A reputable business beats shady parking lot. Deals any day of the week. I never want to deal with lying buyers, fake IDs, and grand jury subpoenas again. This whole fiasco turned my life upside down for over a year. I'm just relieved it's finally over and done with. But I'll certainly be more cautious about how I conduct transactions online. Don't want to end up caught in a criminal investigation ever again. I can't believe I let this happen. I'm usually so careful when it comes to buying things online. But I got duped into buying fake concert tickets on Craigslist, and now about $500. It was for the summer tour of my wife's favorite band, Midnight Sun. She's been obsessed with them for years and has seen them in concert at least 5 times. I'm not as hardcore a fan, but I enjoy their music and always have a great time at their shows. The energy is electric. So when we heard Midnight Sun was touring again, my wife was ecstatic. She immediately went online to get tickets the minute they went on sale. But no luck. They sold out in less than a minute. She was devastated. I tried to console her, promising we'd find a way to get tickets. "Don't worry, hon, they always release more closer to the show date," I naively told her. But the weeks went by and no new batches of tickets were released. My wife was obsessively checking ticket sites every day, with no luck. Over dinner one night, she was venting about the sold-out shows and the unfairness of bots snatching up all the tickets. I couldn't stand to see her so disappointed. That's when I had the bright idea to check Craigslist. I pulled up the concert ticket section and searched for Midnight Sun. And there it was, an ad titled "Midnight Sun Tickets, Great Seats. Can't go anymore." The ad was posted by a guy named Mike. It said he had bought 2 tickets months ago, but can no longer attend because of a work conflict. He was selling them at face value, $250 each. In my excitement, I didn't even pause to consider if this was a scam. The ad seemed so legitimate. Mike provided a screenshot of the receipt and the exact seat numbers. Section C, row 12, seats 14 and 15. When I emailed him asking where he had bought them originally, he gave me a believable story about waiting in the online queue and snagging them as soon as sales started. He answered all my other questions without hesitation. This was the real deal. I told my wife and she practically squealed with excitement. We decided to buy the tickets right away before anyone else did. I contacted Mike and said we were ready to purchase. We agreed on a price and I sent $500 through PayPal. As I clicked send, I thought about how kind it was of a total stranger to sell these in-demand tickets at face value to fellow fans. If only I knew then what I know now. The night of the concert finally arrived. We walked up to the arena, giddy with excitement. I handed our tickets to the usher, already hearing Midnight Sun taking the stage inside. But when he scanned them, a huge red X popped up on the screen. "Invalid ticket," he said in a monotone voice. What? My wife and I pleaded with him to scan them again, but it was no use. They were cheap counterfeits. We were crushed. Numb with disbelief, we walked back to our car. My wife was in tears. I felt like the worst husband ever. I was kicking myself for being so naive. How could I just blindly trust someone on Craigslist? All the warning signs were there, but I was too caught up in scoring these coveted tickets. When I got home, I immediately tried contacting Mike again, but it was useless. His email bounced back. The phone number was disconnected, and the Craigslist ad had vanished. That's when it sunk in that I just handed $500 to a scammer. I felt like such an idiot. Over the next few days, I tried everything I could think of to get our money back or catch the crook. I filed police reports, disputed the charges with PayPal and my bank, but I had willingly sent the money to an anonymous person. The police told me these fake ticket cases were incredibly difficult to solve. The scammer knew how to cover his tracks. My bank said unless I had evidence my account was hacked, they couldn't refund the charges. All they could do was monitor for future fraud. As for the crook, he was long gone with my $500, probably laughing all the way to the offshore account he deposited it in. The police hit dead end after dead end trying to track him down online. I was left feeling like a fool, but also frustrated that people can so easily scam others online without repercussion. My wife and I missed seeing her favorite band and lost a chunk of money in the process. I learned a tough lesson to be much more vigilant and skeptical when buying anything online. Don't just take a seller at their word. Do your homework and double-check their claims. This experience also made me realize how unsafe Craigslist is for major purchases. There's just no accountability. At least with eBay, you have buyer protections in place. But on Craigslist, it's the Wild West. I vowed to never buy event tickets on there again, even if a seller seems totally legitimate. It's just not worth a huge risk. So I got scammed once on Craigslist. Shame on the crook who tricked me. But fool me twice. That's not going to happen. My wife was disappointed she didn't get to see Midnight Sun, but she appreciated the effort I made to find tickets, and I assured her that next time they tour, I'll be smarter about how I try to get seats. No more blindly trusting strangers on sketchy online ticket marketplaces. Hopefully by then I'll have recovered from this expensive life lesson. So, I had recently been laid off from my office job at a marketing company after 5 years of working there. Such a bummer, I know, but it gets worse. It came as quite a shock, as I thought things were going well and I enjoyed the work and my coworkers. But apparently business had slowed and they had to do some restructuring, which I came to find out meant massive layoffs. So there I was, suddenly unemployed and needing to find work quickly. I had some savings to live off of briefly, but the bills would start piling up fast. Being in my mid-30s without kids allowed me more flexibility to potentially switch careers or move if needed. But in the meantime, I desperately needed something to pay the rent. I started scouring job sites like crazy, sending out applications and asking friends if they knew of any openings. One afternoon, while aimlessly browsing Craigslist, I came across a posting that immediately caught my eye. An administrative assistant role at a company called Smith & Jones Financial. They were looking for someone with marketing and office experience, which perfectly matched my background. After reviewing the job description further, it seemed almost too good to be true. The starting pay was higher than I expected, and the role sounded like something I would really enjoy. The company claimed to be rapidly expanding and in need of someone to manage the phones, schedules, mailings, and other administrative work. I felt a spark of hope that perhaps this could be the perfect opportunity to get me back on my feet quickly. Without hesitation, I sent in my resume and cover letter and awaited a reply. A day later, I received an email back from a Nathan Green saying they were quite impressed with my qualifications and would like me to come in for an interview. I couldn't believe such a great prospect came together so quickly. Nathan explained they had just moved corporate headquarters to a new office complex on the outskirts of the city after their company saw massive growth in recent years. He gave me an address out in an industrial area I was unfamiliar with and instructions to park around back and enter through the gray door marked employees only. On the morning of the interview, I put on my best suit and did some research into Smith & Jones Financial online beforehand. Surprisingly, I couldn't find much information beyond their generic website, which had stock images of smiling professionals and promises of integrity and great customer service. There wasn't a whole lot of specifics about what they actually did. Still, I was excited at the opportunity and made sure to leave with plenty of time to locate the new office location. As it turned out, the building was easy enough to find, but looked strangely isolated. It was a nondescript concrete structure within a sprawling industrial complex with no other cars in the parking lot. I wondered if the company was the only tenant or if. Perhaps the office was closed for the day with workers out at lunch. After fixing my hair in the review mirror, I walked up to the ominous back door as instructed. However, when I tried the handle, it was locked tight. I knocked loudly, but there was no answer. Walking around to the front entrance, I found the same situation, locked with the lights off inside. This had to be a mistake, I thought. Perhaps I wrote down the address incorrectly. I tried calling Nathan's cell number that had emailed me earlier, but it went straight to a generic voicemail box that hadn't even been set up with a personal greeting. At this point, I started to get an uneasy feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. After waiting around for 30 minutes holding out hope, it was clear nobody was coming to let me in for the interview. Dejected, I drove back home, not sure if I should report the incident to the police or not. The whole scenario was certainly fishy, but no crime had technically been committed against me. Once I got back to my apartment, I immediately started looking into Smith & Jones Financial more thoroughly. I could find zero information to corroborate they were a real company. Even searching public business records showed nothing. Their website now appeared to be some template anyone could have thrown together. It dawned on me that this job was most likely an elaborate fake designed to lure in unsuspecting applicants. My guess is it was some kind of cruel prank by scam artists or internet trolls with nothing better to do than harass job seekers. What kind of deranged person gets enjoyment out of mocking people who are desperate for work, just trying to pay their bills and survive? All I could do was post warnings about my experience anywhere the job listing appeared online to hopefully prevent others from wasting their time. In hindsight, there were probably clues it was fishy, but I let myself get too excited at the prospect after weeks of rejections and dead ends. At least I learned to be much more diligent in my research going forward. Not everyone is honest or ethical when it comes to job postings, as sad as that is. Plenty of predators out there don't think twice about taking advantage of the vulnerable. I'm just thankful I didn't fall for one of the truly dangerous situations that could have ended much worse. But still, the letdown stung after getting my hopes up. The experience left me feeling frustrated and cynical while trying to find employment. I suppose all you can really do is move on and be more careful next time. At the very least, it made for one wild story to share. I was in desperate need of a new car after my trusty old clunker finally died after 15 years. With a tight budget, I turned to Craigslist hoping to find a good deal on a used car. One listing that caught my eye advertised a 2010 Toyota Camry being sold by a guy named Frank for an unbelievable price. The ad boasted low miles, great condition, clean title, no accidents. It seemed too good to be true. But I was so anxious for a replacement vehicle that I pushed aside any doubts and arranged to check out the Camry. We met in a grocery store parking lot so I could test drive the car. Frank seemed friendly enough, though a bit jittery. He explained he was selling it so cheap because he simply wanted fast cash. The Camry handled wonderfully during my brief spin around the lot. Visually, it looked pretty clean too, other than the back seat appearing a little dirty. When I pointed that out, Frank claimed he just hadn't had time to clean lately. I took the car for an inspection, and amazingly everything checked out mechanically. Frank and I negotiated a price, and I soon handed over a wad of cash. He signed over the title and keys right there in the parking lot. I happily drove away feeling like I'd scored an unbelievable deal. That first week I was uber impressed with the Camry's performance and gas mileage. I joyfully told all my friends about the killer Craigslist deal I'd scored. But after about 10 days of smooth sailing, things took a turn. I began intermittently hearing a faint rattling sound coming from the rear when driving over bumps. I pulled over to inspect under the seats, but couldn't find the source. A few days later, I carelessly spilled a drink in the back seat. In the process of mopping it up, I lifted the bottom cushion, hoping to speed up drying time. That's when I spotted a tightly folded plastic grocery bag shoved up into a crevice near the seat belt buckle. It was taped closed, concealing some kind of contents. My pulse raced wildly as I imagined all sorts of illegal contraband that could be hidden inside. With trembling hands, I slowly peeled back the tape, half expecting to find narcotics or a weapon. But I was not prepared for the half-dozen small plastic baggies filled with powdery white substance that were revealed. I nearly vomited, realizing the prior owner had stashed packages of narcotics, and I had unknowingly purchased a vehicle used for transporting narcotics. In shock, I resealed the bag and stuck it in a glove compartment temporarily. My mind spun picturing the worst-case scenarios if I was caught driving a former dealer's car with the stash still inside. As soon as I got home, I transferred the bag to a box in the back of my closet. I agonized over what to do next, uncertain if I should destroy the evidence or turn it over to police. After an anxious, sleepless night, I decided I had to do the right thing. I called the local police department and rambled through an explanation of finding suspicious contents left in a Craigslist car. The officer who arrived at my house was very understanding, explaining used cars often exchange hands between criminals attempting to cover their tracks. I retrieved the taped plastic bundle and handed it over for testing. The officer confirmed it field tested positive for several ounces of devil's sugar. He took my statement and said I was not in any trouble, but they would be investigating the car's origins. However, he recommended I get rid of the car to avoid potentially being tied to criminals. Over the coming weeks, I fully cooperated with the deepening police investigation, providing every detail I could recall about my interaction with the shady Frank. It turned out the Camry had previously belonged to a now imprisoned dealer, and Frank likely obtained it illegally to make a quick buck. The whole frightening ordeal left me shaken and paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. I was overwhelmed with anger and frustration at being scammed out of my hard-earned money. The police made clear I had little recourse to recover the cash since the sale was private and undocumented. Ultimately, I sold the ill-fated Camry to a wholesaler for a massive loss, simply to disassociate from the criminal ties. I also learned some tough lessons about thoroughly vetting cars and sellers before purchase, and that when something seems too good to be true, it almost certainly is. I still peruse Craigslist for deals, but I'm much more cautious now, doing extensive research first. This experience taught me that people will readily take advantage of others' trust. I'm just relieved I contacted police so the packages didn't end up dispersed on the street, and that I didn't find myself embroiled in a serious criminal enterprise due to my naivety about the realities of buying used vehicles. I'm thankful the outcome wasn't drastically worse, but remained disheartened that dishonest people like Frank can scam unsuspecting buyers. I hope in the future I can help others avoid the same pitfalls and heartache I endured. For now, I drive my Camry replacement with wiser eyes and a deeper understanding of human nature's capacity for deceit. I was moving from California to New York for a new job and needed to sell my trusty blue Schwinn mountain bike quick before the big move. This bike had been with me through college and many city adventures over the past 5 years. The blue paint was faded and it had some scratches, but it still rode great after all the miles we covered together. I posted an ad on Craigslist with the headline like "New Blue Schwinn for sale, $200 OBO." In the ad details I described the bike as lightly used, well taken care of with upgraded alloy wheels and a front shock suspension system. I took a few photos showing the bike from different angles and made sure to get clear shots of the upgraded components to highlight that it was a quality ride. Within a day of posting, I got a text inquiry from a guy named Mike saying he could pick up the bike that same evening. We agreed to meet at 7 p.m. in the parking lot of the Trader Joe's near my apartment in the Mission neighborhood of San Francisco. This spot was always bustling with people, so I figured it was safe. I rolled the Schwinn down the sidewalk and locked it up on a bike rack in front of the grocery store about 10 minutes early. I stood nearby and watched groups of shoppers shuffling in and out with bags full of groceries. A few minutes after 7 p.m., an older tan pickup truck pulled up next to me. The driver had tattoos covering his beefy arms and looked to be in his 40s. He rolled down the window and asked, "You selling the blue bike?" I said, "Yes, this is it right here." The man introduced himself as Mike, and we shook hands as he looked over the Schwinn. I held the bike steady as he spun the wheels and checked the gear shifters. I pointed out the upgraded alloy components and recent tune-up to justify my $200 asking price. Mike asked if he could take it for a quick test ride around the parking lot to get a feel for it, which seemed reasonable enough. I said sure and watched cautiously as he threw his leg over the seat and pedaled off. As Mike circled the far end of the lot, I suddenly got a bad feeling. He looked back and could tell I was watching him closely. When he came around the second loop, he yelled, "Be right back," and quickly pedaled out of the parking lot exit, turning onto the main road. My heart sank as I froze, watching my beloved bike disappear into the night with a stranger. How could I be so stupid to let him test ride it alone? I waited helplessly for 10 minutes thinking maybe he would return, but deep down I knew that bike was long gone. Just then a police cruiser pulled into the lot and an officer approached me. I quickly explained the situation, how a man named Mike had just stolen my bike during a Craigslist sale. I described the guy's tattoos, hand truck, and everything that happened. The cop took down the info and said they would circulate a notice to be on the lookout. I slowly walked my pathetic self home empty-handed, replaying the scene in my head. I felt like such an idiot letting my guard down with a random Craigslist buyer. I should have listened to my gut instinct when Mike asked to ride it alone. As I turned the corner of my street, still sulking, I suddenly heard a familiar clicking sound. I looked up and couldn't believe it. There was Mike rolling up the sidewalk on my blue Schwinn. We made direct eye contact. Mike's face went pale as he tried to turn the bike around, but I sprinted straight toward him in attack mode. I caught up and lunged for the back of the seat before he could speed away. "You're not getting away again," I shouted, adrenaline pumping. I tried pedaling faster, but I held tight, my feet running alongside the rear tire. He veered left toward a bench, trying to knock me off balance, but I skirted around it, yanking back hard on the seat. We struggled down the sidewalk, Mike pulling forward, me pulling back. A woman yelled at us to stop as we almost collided with her stroller. After a block of this tug-of-war, I saw an opening and jerked the handlebars as hard as I could. Mike toppled over into the bushes in front of someone's house, cursing loudly. I immediately hopped on my bike and pedaled away as fast as I could, not looking back. Mike yelled after me but didn't give chase. I stood up pedaling to gain speed, gripping the handlebars ferociously, riding for my life like E.T. fleeing the police. I didn't stop until I was inside my apartment with the door locked and bike secured. My heart was racing, but I let out a huge exhale knowing my Schwinn was safely back in my possession. What a fool I was to trust a random stranger based on a couple texts and a handshake. I learned the hard way that Craigslist buyers can't be taken at face value. From now on, I will only meet in busy public spots in daylight, never let the item leave my sight, and take cash up front before handing it over. I'm just thankful I could chase that robber down on foot. Who knows if I'll be so lucky next time. After I calmed down, I posted an update to my listing warning others about the theft attempt. The whole scary ordeal made me hesitant to deal with more Craigslist strangers. But I really needed the money for my move, so I decided to try again with safer precautions. I ended up selling the bike properly the very next day to a nice NYU student named Amy. We met on campus in Washington Square Park with security guards nearby. She took a quick spin around the park loop after I got cash in hand. Thankfully, it was an easy transaction with no theft attempts this time. I was sad to part with my trusty Schwinn after all our adventures over the years, but I found a good new home in the city that bike theft built, and no longer have to stress about its safety. This saga was a wake-up call to be vigilant when dealing with sketchy Craigslist buyers. My fool days of assuming strangers have good intentions are officially over. Browsing Craigslist is one of my guilty pleasures. I'm not even looking to buy anything most of the time, just killing time scrolling through the quirky ads and imagining the stories behind each post. Last Tuesday night, I was doing my usual Craigslist routine when an antique mirror caught my eye. The post didn't have much of a description, just a few photos of an ornate floor-length mirror propped against a white wall. But the mirror itself was breathtaking. The wood frame was carved with intricate florals and scrollwork, dark with age but still rich and smooth. The glass was old and wavy, distorted in places, completely unique. I could easily picture it as a statement piece in my bedroom. On impulse, I clicked through to message the seller. She gave me an address nearby where I could come see the mirror in person. The next evening after work, I drove over to a small blue bungalow on a quiet side street. A woman around 60 answered the door and led me inside. She introduced herself as Martha and explained she was downsizing to a smaller apartment. The mirror had been left behind by the previous owner of the house. Martha didn't know its history, but guessed it was well over 100 years old. As she chatted, I gazed up at the mirror propped against the living room wall. It was even more striking up close, the wood almost black with a deep patina that only comes from age. The glass was old and wavy too, distorting my reflection in ways that made me curiously uneasy. Despite that instinctive discomfort, I couldn't get the mirror out of my mind. The price Martha quoted was very reasonable, and I decided then and there to buy it. With the help of her son, we loaded the bulky but surprisingly lightweight mirror into my hatchback. At home, I mounted it on the wall opposite my bed. Stepping back, I admired how it filled the space above my dresser, lending my room the glamorous feel of a suite in a five-star hotel. I loved its sheer presence. Staring into the uneven antique glass was disorienting in an intriguing way. The first 2 nights, all was normal. Then the strangeness began. It started with small things. I leave my bedroom door cracked open, but find it closed tightly when I returned. Knickknacks on my dresser shifted position overnight, or I'd tilt the mirror to see an outfit from another angle, but inexplicably the angle would change by morning. I assumed I was just being forgetful until a week later things escalated. Late at night, the mirror's glass began faintly glowing. I'd hear heavy creaking footsteps upstairs when no one was home. Whispers and knocks came from its direction at all hours, always in threes. Lights flickered, doors slammed. A feeling of being watched prickled my neck. I knew something wasn't right. The activity centered around the antique mirror, continuing even after I moved it to another room. None of my other antique furniture had this effect. Friends who came over started noticing the strange vibe as well, uneasy in its presence. A psychic Yoon confirmed she felt dark energy clinging to the mirror. I reached out to the seller, Martha, but she had no insight. She suggested I research the history of the mirror and its previous owners. What I found gave me chills. The mirror had belonged to a secretive cult active in the area back in the late 1800s. The cult was rumored to have used the mirror in dark occult rituals before dying out under sinister circumstances. Their leader, a mysterious man named Jacob Larchwood, who originally owned the mirror, was said to have summoned spirits and harnessed demonic forces. The superstitious townspeople of the time avoided Larchwood and his followers like the plague. There were whispered tales of innocents who got entrapped by the cult after catching a glimpse of their own reflection in the antique glass during a full moon. The mirror was believed to be a portal to the other side. Now I understood why I felt that innate discomfort upon first seeing my reflection. Just looking at the silver glass gave me goosebumps. I wanted nothing to do with occult forces or spirits from the other side. But destroying the mirror might make matters worse, as Martha suggested. First, I tried blessing and cleansing rituals, but the activity only increased. Strange smells and unexplained cold spots permeated my home. I felt a dark presence following me even outside the house. It seemed the only way to rid myself of this cursed mirror was to return it to its original location, back to the decrepit old farmhouse where it had hung for decades. One night, under a full moon, I drove with the mirror out to the abandoned farmhouse miles from town, where the cult had supposedly practiced their rituals. With effort, I pried off boards to enter through a broken window in the back. Guided by moonlight, I brought the mirror back to an empty frame waiting in a downstairs room. As soon as I slid the mirror into place, an icy gust blasted through the room. The glass flashed with a harsh glow, illuminating a figure standing behind me in the dark, a tall, grim man in aged garb with wild hair and eyes that pierced my soul. I didn't dare turn. Scrambling back to the window, I raced to my car and tore off down the gravel road. I've never gone back to that farmhouse. No more disturbances happened once I returned the mirror to its original haunt. But sometimes I still feel lingering eyes on me and catch my own reflection distorting in unnatural ways. This experience left me unsettled to my core. No amount of Craigslist browsing will ever tempt me to buy another antique after this. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.